I don't want you to run from me, not because I'm here to tell you what to do, but because I want to tell you why. Why you feel tired even when you rest. Why you keep moving forward yet something inside still feels unfinished. Why you've survived things no one ever applauded you for. I'm not here with loud promises or easy answers. I'm here with the truth. Spoken softly, the way life speaks when you finally listen. If you stay with me for a moment, you might realize something important. You were never weak. You were never lost. You were just carrying more than most people could, so don't run, just breathe. Let me tell you why your story still matters and why you're not done yet. I don't want you to run from me because running has become your reflex, not your choice. Somewhere along the way, you learned that staying meant feeling and feeling meant pain, so you taught yourself to move before the weight settled in your chest. You leave conversations unfinished. You distract yourself when thoughts get too close. You smile when you should be honest, and none of that makes you weak. It makes you human who adapted to survive. You don't run because you're careless. You run because you've carried things quietly for a long time. Things no one checked on, things no one stayed long enough to notice. When life kept asking more from you than it ever gave back, you did what you had to do. You learned to move forward without unpacking what was breaking inside you. You learned to be functional instead of whole. Staying feels heavier than leaving because staying asks you to sit with the truth. It asks you to admit that some days you are tired in ways sleep can't fix. It asks you to acknowledge the moments that changed you without your permission, the disappointments you never processed, the love you gave that didn't return the same way, the faith you had in people, in outcomes, in yourself that didn't turn out the way you hoped. When you stay, there is no noise to hide behind, no urgency, no escape route, just you and the weight of everything you've been avoiding. And that weight feels unbearable because you've been holding it alone. Leaving gives you movement, and movement creates the illusion of progress. But movement without direction is just distance from yourself. You tell yourself you'll deal with it later. When things calm down, when you're stronger, when life finally slows. But life doesn't slow, it just replaces one pressure with another. And the things you avoid don't disappear. They wait. They show up in your body, in your patience running thin, in your sleep that never feels deep enough, in the way you pull away from people who try to get close. You run because staying would force you to admit that some of your strength came from necessity, not choice, that you didn't always want to be the one who held it together, that sometimes you needed someone else to say, you don't have to be strong right now, but no one did. So you became that person for yourself and you never learned how to stop. There's a moment before you run, a quiet moment, a pause. That's the moment I'm talking to. The moment when your chest tightens and your mind starts planning exits. That's not danger. That's familiarity. That's your nervous system remembering old situations where staying meant getting hurt, disappointed, or unseen. You think leaving protects you, and sometimes it did, sometimes it saved you. But protection that never turns off becomes a prison. You can't build a life if you're always ready to abandon it the second it asks something uncomfortable from you. Staying doesn't mean forcing yourself into pain. It means allowing yourself to acknowledge what's already there. The hurt you pretend doesn't exist. The fear you label as logic. The exhaustion you disguise as independence. You don't trust staying because staying requires vulnerability, and vulnerability once cost you more than you were prepared to pay. So now you pay in smaller ways every day, in distance, in loneliness, in a constant low-level ache that you've learned to call normal. I don't want you to run from me because I'm not here to demand anything from you. I'm here to remind you that staying doesn't mean drowning. It means learning how to stand in shallow water long enough to understand your own depth. You've mistaken endurance for healing. You've mistaken silence for peace. You've mistaken isolation for control. And control feels safe when your past felt unpredictable. The truth is, staying feels heavy because you've been carrying unresolved weight for years. And of course, it feels unbearable when you finally stop moving. Of course, it hurts when you finally notice the damage. It doesn't mean you were wrong to survive the way you did. It means you're ready for a different way now. You don't have to relive everything at once. You don't have to explain yourself perfectly. You don't have to be brave in the way movies describe bravery. Sometimes bravery is simply not leaving the moment your instincts tell you to disappear. Staying is unfamiliar, and unfamiliar things always feel heavier at first, like muscles you've never used, like honesty you've never practiced, like rest you never allowed yourself to earn. You are not broken for wanting to run. You are not failing because staying feels hard. You are learning slowly that the weight you're afraid of is not the moment itself, but the years you spent avoiding it. And the longer you keep running, the heavier it becomes because you keep adding today's avoidance to yesterday's pain. Staying is the first time you stop adding weight. I don't want you to run from me because I'm not chasing you. I'm standing where you've been afraid to stand, and everything you've been avoiding is already inside you, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to be understood, waiting to be carried with intention instead of urgency, waiting for you to realize that staying was never about punishment. It was about finally giving yourself the chance to feel without collapsing, to face without fleeing, to exist without constantly preparing. For escapsulence is where truth waits, and that's exactly why you avoid it. Not because you don't like quiet, but because quiet removes the filters. In silence, there's no performance, no explanation, no one to impress. It's just you without the story you tell others and without the story you even tell yourself. Noise keeps you moving. Noise gives you reasons. Noise fills the space where questions might form. You stay busy so you don't have to listen. You scroll, you work, you talk, you plan, you distract. Because the moment things slow down, something inside you starts knocking, and you're not sure you're ready to open that door. Silence is uncomfortable because it doesn't argue back. It doesn't soften the truth. It doesn't rush you past it. It just waits, patient, unmoving. It doesn't care how long you avoid it. It knows you'll come eventually. In silence, you hear the thoughts you've been pushing away, the ones that don't fit into your daily routine, the ones that ask questions you don't have answers for yet. Are you actually happy or just occupied? Are you strong or just used to carrying weight? Are you fulfilled or just familiar with disappointment? Silence brings up the feelings you postponed, grief that never had time to land, anger you swallowed because it wasn't convenient, love you never fully expressed, regret you disguised as acceptance. In silence, there's no escape from the emotional backlog you've been accumulating. You're not afraid of silence itself. You're afraid of what it reveals, because silence doesn't tell you who to be. It shows you who you are when no one is watching. And sometimes that version of you feels unfinished, tired, confused, still hurting. You learned early that expressing too much made things worse, that asking questions didn't always bring answers, that honesty wasn't always safe. So you adapted. You became efficient with your emotions. You trimmed them to what was manageable. You kept the rest locked away, telling yourself you'd deal with it later. Silence doesn't respect that deal. It brings everything back to the surface. Not to overwhelm you, but to remind you that unresolved things don't fade with time. They just wait for stillness. In silence, you realize how much of your life is lived on autopilot. How often you say yes when you mean maybe. How often you say you're fine when you're not even close. How often you avoid difficult conversations, not because you don't care, but because you're tired of explaining pain that never seemed to matter before. Silence makes you aware of the gap between who you are and who you've been pretending to be. And that gap feels heavy. It feels like failure, but it's not. It's information. You think silence will judge you. It won't. It doesn't accuse. It doesn't shame. It simply reflects. It shows you patterns, reactions, habits you didn't realize were running your life. It shows you how often you choose comfort over honesty, distance over connection, distraction over healing. Silence is where you realize that some of your strength was built on suppression, that some of your calm came from avoidance, that some of your peace was just the absence of conflict, not the presence of understanding. You keep yourself surrounded by sound because sound gives you control. You choose the music, you choose the voices, you choose the narrative. Silence takes that control away, and without control, you feel exposed. But exposure is not the same as danger. Feeling something deeply doesn't mean it will destroy you. Sitting with the truth doesn't mean it will break you. Silence isn't there to hurt. It's there to introduce you to yourself without interruption. In silence, you notice what your body has been trying to say, the tension you've normalized, the fatigue you've ignored, the rest you keep postponing because you don't feel like you've earned it yet. Silence shows you that you don't actually need to have everything figured out. That uncertainty doesn't mean failure. That not knowing is part of being alive, not a flaw in your character. You avoid silence because it slows you down enough to feel. And feeling feels risky when you've spent years being the one who stays composed. But composure isn't the same as clarity. And silence is where clarity begins to form. Truth doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it doesn't force itself into your life. It waits quietly, trusting that one day you'll be ready to hear it without running. Silence is where you learn that you don't need to be fixed before you're allowed to rest, that you don't need to justify your pain for it to be valid, that you don't need permission to acknowledge what you've been carrying. You think silence will make you feel alone, but it's often the first place you actually meet yourself, without expectations, without roles, without the need to perform strength. In silence, you realize that some answers don't come as words, they come as acceptance, as awareness, as the quiet understanding that you've been doing the best you could with what you knew at the time. You don't need to fear silence, you need to trust it, because it doesn't take anything away from you. It gives you back the parts of yourself you've been too busy to listen to, the parts that have been waiting patiently, knowing that one day you would stop running long enough to hear what has always been true. Pain is not your enemy, even though you've treated it like one for most of your life. You've been taught to fight it, numb it, outrun it, silence it. You were told that strength means not feeling too much, not showing cracks, not letting discomfort slow you down. So you learned to brace yourself against pain instead of listening to it. Pain didn't show up to ruin you. It showed up to signal something mattered. Something was crossed. Something was lost. Something inside you needed attention. But no one explained that to you. They just told you to be strong and move on, as if pain were a weakness instead of a message. Avoidance feels safer than pain because avoidance gives you control. You get to decide what you look at and what you don't. You get to decide which memories stay buried and which emotions get acknowledged. Pain doesn't ask for permission, it arrives when it needs to. And that unpredictability made you treat it like a threat, so you avoided, you stayed busy, you reframed everything as fine. You convinced yourself that if you didn't talk about it, think about it, or feel it, it would eventually disappear. But pain doesn't disappear when ignored. It changes form. It becomes tension. It becomes irritability. It becomes distance. It becomes a quiet heaviness you carry everywhere without knowing why. Avoidance taught you how to function, but it never taught you how to heal. It helped you survive moments, but it cost you presence. You learned how to keep going, but not how to process what you went through. And over time, you started confusing survival with living. Pain asks you to slow down. Avoidance demands speed. Pain asks you to feel. Avoidance tells you to distract. Pain asks you to be honest. Avoidance tells you to be efficient. One leads to understanding. The other leads to repetition. You've noticed the patterns. The same kinds of situations triggering the same reactions. The same emotional walls going up automatically. The same exhaustion after pretending you're unaffected. That's not because you're broken. It's because pain you haven't listened to keeps finding new ways to speak. You avoid pain because you're afraid it will overwhelm you. Because the last time you really felt something deeply, it changed you. Because you don't trust yourself to fall apart and still be okay. Because you had to hold it together before, and you're not sure who you'd be if you let go now. But pain doesn't demand collapse. It demands attention. It doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to be understood. When you stop fighting it, you realize it's not as endless as you imagined. It comes in waves, not walls. And waves pass when you don't try to outrun them. Avoidance keeps pain alive longer than necessary. Every time you push it down, you add pressure. Every time you deny it, you teach yourself that your internal experience doesn't matter. And that lesson seeps into how you treat yourself everywhere else. You start minimizing your needs. Your boundaries blur. Your tolerance for discomfort increases in unhealthy ways. You accept less than you deserve because you're used to enduring instead of addressing. You call it patience. You call it maturity. But deep down, it's unresolved pain asking not to be ignored anymore. Pain clarifies. It shows you where you were hurt, where you compromised yourself, where something mattered enough to leave a mark. Avoidance blurs everything. It keeps you confused, disconnected, unsure why you feel the way you do. You don't heal by pretending nothing happened. You heal by acknowledging that something did, by letting pain be information instead of an enemy, by understanding that feeling deeply is not the same as being weak. Avoidance isolates you. It keeps you locked inside your own head, dealing with everything alone. Pain, when allowed, connects you. It reminds you that you're human, that your reactions make sense, that you're not defective for feeling affected. You've been running from pain because you thought facing it would slow you down, but avoiding it has been draining you quietly for years. It's been taking your energy, your clarity, your ability to be fully present. Pain doesn't ask you to live in the past. It asks you to integrate it, to let it take its rightful place in your story instead of haunting the background. Avoidance keeps reopening the same wounds because they never get the chance to close properly. You're not behind because you still feel things from long ago. You're not failing because some memories still sting. That's not weakness, that's unprocessed experience. When you stop treating pain like an enemy, you stop fighting yourself. You stop wasting energy on suppression. You stop being afraid of your own emotional depth. You begin to understand that pain is not proof that something is wrong with you. It's proof that you cared, that you tried, that you lived. Avoidance promises relief but delivers numbness. Pain promises discomfort but offers clarity. One keeps you stuck, the other moves you forward. Even when it's slow, you do. You need to seek pain. You just need to stop running from it. Because the moment you allow it space, it loses its power to control you. And what remains is understanding, self-respect, and a quieter strength that doesn't come from endurance, but from honesty. You are allowed to slow down without disappearing, even though your instincts tell you otherwise. Somewhere along the way, you learned that slowing down meant falling behind, that rest was something you earned only after everything was done, and that stepping back would make you invisible. So you kept moving, even when your body asked you to pause, even when your mind needed space, even when your heart was tired of keeping pace with expectations that never seemed to end. You confuse slowing down with giving up because you've been praised for endurance more than balance. People noticed you when you were productive, reliable, always available. They admired how much you could handle, not how much it cost you. So you learn to equate worth with momentum. If you're not moving, you feel unnecessary. If you're not responding, you feel guilty. If you're not pushing forward, you feel like you're fading. Disappearing became a fear long before it became a habit. You worry that if you stop, people will move on without you, that opportunities won't wait, that the world will forget you were ever part of it. So you stay visible by staying busy. You stay relevant by staying exhausted. You stay connected by never fully resting. But slowing down is not the same as stepping away. It's not erasing yourself. It's recalibrating. It's choosing presence over performance. It's allowing your nervous system to remember what calm feels like instead of constantly bracing for the next demand. You've been operating in survival mode for so long that stillness feels unsafe, silence feels suspicious, rest feels undeserved. When things finally quiet down, your mind looks for problems because it's not used to peace. You think something must be wrong if nothing is urgent. You disappear emotionally long before you disappear physically. You're there but not fully. You respond but without depth. You show up but on autopilot. That's the cost of never slowing down. You don't vanish from the world, but you slowly lose connection with yourself. Slowing down doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring in a sustainable way. It means recognizing that constantly pushing yourself doesn't make you strong. It makes you numb. And numbness is not resilience. You've been afraid that if you pause, everything you've been holding back will catch up to you at once, that you'll feel too much, that you'll realize how tired you actually are, that you won't know how to start again. But slowing down isn't about stopping forever. It's about allowing enough space to breathe so that continuing doesn't cost you your health, your clarity, your sense of self. You don't owe constant access to anyone. You don't owe instant responses. You don't owe productivity at the expense of your well-being. The world will not collapse because you took a moment to recalibrate. And the people who matter won't disappear because you chose to move at a human pace. You learned to equate rest with laziness because you were needed early, because slowing down wasn't an option when responsibilities came before readiness, because you had to keep going even when didn't feel prepared. That wasn't strength. That was necessity. And necessity doesn't get to define you forever. You're allowed to exist without proving anything. You're allowed to take breaks without explaining them. You're allowed to move slowly and still move forward. Progress doesn't always look like acceleration. Sometimes it looks like stability. Sometimes it looks like saying no. Sometimes it looks like doing less so you can feel more. When you slow down, you don't disappear. You become more present. You notice what you've been missing. You reconnect with your own signals instead of overriding them. You start making choices instead of reacting to pressure. Disappearing happens when you abandon yourself to meet expectations that never stop multiplying. Slowing down is how you stay connected to who you are beneath all the roles you've been playing. You don't lose relevance by resting. You lose relevance when you're too drained to show up authentically. When you're exhausted, you're replaceable because you're operating on default. When you're grounded, you're irreplaceable because you're intentional. You don't need to vanish to protect your peace. You just need to stop running at a speed that keeps you disconnected from it. Slowing down is not a retreat, it's a return.